Well, the Royal Navy, of course, during the, I guess, evolution of iron vessels, had to play a leadership role. And because they were a two-ocean navy, consequently, they had to continue to improve upon the designs that they created. And some were failures, some were superior ships to any in the world. But in a 20-year period, from 1860 to 1880, the British are going to produce some of the finest ships, and you can see them all go through an evolution. This is, of course, the Captain, HMS Captain, and we'll get to that story in just a little bit. The real role for ironclads in European navies began during the Crimean War, and the need for these ironclads was as a result of shell guns. And of course, the first naval battle of the Crimean War was in 1853 in November, the Battle of Sinope, where shell guns sank the Turkish fleet with ease. So everyone pays attention to that. However, when the Anglo-French Navy comes in to try to conquer the Crimea, they will find that the Russian forts are unstoppable. I mean, they damage many Allied vessels. And so they will come up with a concept of known as floating iron-cased batteries. And those iron-cased batteries, the French will actually build the first ones. The English will actually build some that serve in the Baltic, known as the Erebus, Glaton, and the Aneta. So basically, they are they only go 3 knots, so you got to tow them into position. But once in position, the Russian forts at Kinburn, which are stone and sand, and they're really powerful forts, they are all knocked down by the ordnance coming out of the Lav-class vessels that fight at the Battle of Kinburn, and that which causes the Russians to give up Sevastopol. So anyway, the Royal Navy goes, oh my gosh, because after the war, the French take a traditional designed frigate and put iron plate over the wood and made the first ocean-going ironclad. As a result of this, the British will respond with this vessel, which is actually England's first ironclad ocean-going vessel. Now let's look at this bad boy. It is going to be called a broadside ironclad, because notice, just like on any old frigate, it's got gun ports. It is a unique vessel. Once again, we're trying to marry sail and steam, which is a design issue. But the Warrior actually has a sister ship known as the Black Prince. And so this ship was 210 feet in length. It had 10 110-pounder Armstrong rifles and 4 70-pounder Armstrong rifles, and those are actually breech-loading guns. So this is the height of naval technology when this hits the water. See, the British Parliament, when you have the Battle of the Ironclads, Battle of Hampton Roads, they all go, oh my gosh, we only have 2 ironclads, and ironclads are the future. Now, of course, this ship versus the Monitor, I won't say who'd win, but I'm pretty sure. You can tell by just looking. It had 10 boilers, 10 furnaces. It could go 14.3 knots under steam. It could go 13.75 knots under sail, and its combined speed would be 17.5 knots. The big thing about this vessel is that it could escape any ship it could not destroy. And that is my kind of ship. And and you can well imagine this going into action against a monitor, and it's no contest. Of course, the British, like the Warrior class, here's a nice, but you know, this combination of sail and steam is going to lead to a conflict. This is the British making a what is known as the Hotspur, and the Hotspur is, of course, a character in Henry IV, Part 1 by William Shakespeare. And anyway, so this is a look at the bow. Oh my gosh. Look there. What is it? A built-in ram. So the influences of the Civil War come to Europe because everyone's going, wow, if we are protected because of the iron, we now can run around ramming ships. And so this became very, very popular. I have to say, this ship is built in part because of the success of the Austrian Navy during the Battle of Lissa in 1866. So you'll notice once we really start building ironclads, we're going to start focusing on the ram as a weapon. I'm going to tell you, you're going to see this in ship design all the way up into the first part of the 20th century. However, you can't use your ram anymore because with a 12-inch rifled gun, I can blow you out of the water before you get to me. So, you know, that only lasts so long, but it looked pretty neat. And so this is going to be its replacement. They go through a series of ships. One is the Bellotron, which was a central battery ship. Now, central battery is going to be different than the broadside because actually they're going to build an iron citadel or casemate on the deck to mount the guns. And so this becomes very, very good. It's what makes the Bellotron so good, it's the same class as the Audacious, is that it had a double hull so that it could protect against torpedoes, spar torpedoes. It had a bracket frame system and watertight compartments. The impact of, like, the sinking of the Tecumseh at Mobile Bay, the sinking of the CSS Albemarle with a spar torpedo, that all had an impact on the British. So the British are observing what's happening during the Civil War and integrating into their designs how to make a ship more successful. I got to tell you, by this time this ship is put in the water, we have electric torpedoes by Whitehead, and so we got to have it in a pretty good shape. Now, believe it or not, notice the bow of this ship. What makes the Audacious and the Bellotron so important is that they have a U-form rather than a V-form ram in order to give buoyancy and minimize the tendency towards plunging. In other words, you know, when you're at heavy sea, plunging down, that's kind of what happened to the Monitor, which was not a good thing. And so the box casemate will basically contain 10 9-inch rifles and 5 7-inch rifles. They're muzzle-loading rifles, by the way. The Audacious, which we're looking at now, is just the same, a box casemate. And so the casemate is a midships, and it's still a sailing vessel despite the steam power. So this is kind of the British going, well, how are we really going to do these things? And so this is a great one because you can see basically, the British in 1857 built a steam screw ship of the line known as the Royal Sovereign. And basically, with the support of Prince Albert, Cowper Coles will actually start to develop new styles of turrets. And these turrets are going to have a huge impact. And Coles was the darling of the British press, especially because of the support of Prince Albert. And so he will write letters to the editorials and whatnot. He's in the news a lot saying this, we have to do better than this. This is, of course, a turreted ship. You can see where the turrets are. Basically, Edward Reed, at 33 years old, became the chief naval constructor of the Royal Navy. Now, he had to modify the Monarch to give it a high forecastle and poop, which prevented axial fire, okay? So your turrets do not have a good field of fire. What's in the way? The larger bows. You see the forecastle, and you got masts in the way, so you only have a certain arc of fire that is limiting the impact of your ship. And so it had an overly high freeboard at 18 feet. And basically, you have a ship that has center line turrets, which is a really major improvement. And they mounted 12-inch rifled guns. And when you think of 12-inch rifled guns, number one, you realize your range has increased because it's a rifle and because of what it's going to strike. It also had a secondary armament because you don't have full arc of fire because of the turrets. You can see they'll have two 7-inch Armstrong rifles in the bow and one in the stern, just so they can have fire head, fire rear, and that kind of made up for the inability of the turret to properly turn. And so this is a big standard that we're seeing change the way we're building ships. And I have to say, the biggest thing is, so this is, just think, by 1870, the British have abandoned broadside ironclads and central battery ironclads for the flexibility given by turrets. Now, you could see, this is the Monarch again. You got a better feel of where the turrets are, bingo, bango. And so, but it's still a sail rig. And so once again, you can see their arc of fire is very limited. Now, we know the guy that claims to create the turret is our hero, John Erickson. And he actually takes an idea by Thomas Tilnby, and he will turn it into a workable turret. Now, so this is the Erickson style turret. And if you notice, the flaws of this turret happen to be it sits in a brass ring and it's turned by this spindle. Okay? So what makes this a bad turret? That spindle is not strong enough really to work that turret as it should be. Furthermore, we're sitting in a brass ring, and as a result of sitting in the brass ring, we are susceptible for plunging fire to jam your turret. And we can talk about all sorts of battles where that happens, especially the Battle of Charleston. And so Erickson's turret gets real popular. This is my favorite slide. So we're seeing the different types of turrets that are going to have this evolution. Now, I'm sorry this slide shows the USS Casco because it could barely mount a turret, and I'll talk about Casco class one day soon. But this is, you can see Erickson has that thin spindle. The Eads turret also operates on a brass ring, but notice the cylinder beneath it that is going to turn it. And actually, that is going to strengthen the ability for the ship to turn. Cole's turrets are bigger, squatter, and they actually can carry heavier guns. You know, Erickson, despite saying, oh, I need 15-inch guns to be on my turrets, and that's what we see in the Passaic class, oh my gosh, they don't modify the gun ports. So if you look some of them, the muzzle is right inside the gun port, you know, because they couldn't fit it out. Cole's is a more flexible system. It also rotates. Look at that. It's rotating on wheels that are protected by glacis of iron. Consequently, these turrets are not so susceptible for jamming. And I think that's a really huge point when we want to think of how the Royal Navy makes a huge step forward by having and using the Cole's turret. But Cole's is really a obnoxious person. So he keeps complaining about all the designs that are starting to use his type of turret. And so with the Monarch, he demands, you ready for this, that there's James Eads, and we saw his turret, bingo. And he, of course, is famous for creating bridges, snag boats, city-class ironclads during the Civil War. But his turret is an improvement over Erickson, but Erickson has more political power, so only so many Eads turrets were made. However, this is what's going to lead into the future, and there he is, not a flattering image of Cowper Coles. Now, I got to tell you, he is not a formal naval architect. He is actually a line officer in the Royal Navy, but he has learned about ship design and particularly how to make protected gun platforms that can fire in a full circuit. That evolution for him begins in the Crimean War. So this is what he thinks a ship should be like. And we want double turrets. Notice where the turrets are. There and there, with a central citadel, right, to have some secondary armaments and also to protect the funnel and other parts of the ship. So this is the ships of the future. Notice we don't have a lot of mass on this ship. So that is a huge point that is going to cause some problems. Now, thinking about this style of ship that he wants to use, see the ram bow, you can see he is going to come up with this ship, the Captain. Now, he had the backing of the First Lord of Admiralty, the Duke of Somerset, and the Royal Navy agreed to build a second seagoing turreted ironclad to be built to Cowper Cole's specifications. And they pick a private contractor, Lards in Birkenhead, to actually complete this thing. And so Lards submits proposals based on Cole's concepts, and as soon as they show up on July 1866, Edward Reed goes, oh my gosh, you can't build this ship because the design freeboard was 8 feet. He also thought that estimated weight was low and that its center of gravity was likely to be higher than estimated by the builders. And so this is a big point. However, everyone's tired of Cowper Coles complaining, and he's got the ear of the special people. And so Comptroller Spencer Robinson of the Royal Navy, he also objected to the ship's low freeboard. But Duke of Somerset says, I'm going to approve the design to keep Coles off my back. And because he had such an influence because he became the darling of the British news. So here you go. This is the Captain as we see it. It was clear when the new ship floated out of dry dock in March of 1869 that it was well overweight. They had sea trials in 1870, so they had to modify the design to build up the bow, right, to give it the necessary sea-going qualities. But this meant the sacrifice of field-ahead fire. Now, this ship is going to be 6,950 tons, 320 feet in length by 53 feet in beam, 2 turrets mounted, 4 12-inch muzzle-loading rifles, and then it also had for ahead and stern firing 2 7-inch breech-loading Armstrong rifles. Now, the captain's trials were successful, but sadly, they designed it as a full-rigged ship. Now, Reed will say the stress under heavy winds and seas, so the freeboard is going to be 6.7 inches. Now, we know what the Monitor's freeboard is 18 inches. And was that good? No. The Monitor sinks. So all of a sudden, we have this low freeboard, and then we have the stress onto the ship of this built up, and then we have the sails and the steam. So this is a kind of a mixture. So what's going to happen is, now you can see the waves in this image kind of lapping up, right up to the where the turrets are. And so basically, on September 6, 1870, 4 months after commissioning, the Captain was cruising off of Cape Finster when a storm came up about midnight with the sea lashing over its deck edge. They said the seas were 20 to 25 feet, and you got a freeboard, 6 feet and 7 inches. So that's kind of a problem in ship design, in my opinion. And so because they had their sails up, that put stress because of the high winds of the storm, and the Captain is going to capsize. And with a loss of 472 men, including Coles, and out of a crew of 490, actually, the death toll from the Captain was greater than sustained by the Royal Navy at Trafalgar. So, this is a tremendous disaster. What do the British learn from this? We got to maintain a better freeboard. We have to still use these turrets, and the sails do not function well with an iron vessel. And so this, is a hard thing for, old admirals to give up on sails. And so, but the British begin an evolution of doing it by this vessel, the Cerberus, and I've been on this vessel. So it's breakwater in Melbourne Harbor, and it's really deteriorating now. But this is called a breastwork monitor. Now, that means that it has you can see in this picture right here, that it has a centrally built superstructure and breastwork amidships, on which the turrets were mounted. Ooh, this is so cool. So you could see the central tower, and basically the turrets were mounted, one at each end. This arrangement provided a clear field of fire, right? And that clear field of fire is very, very important. And so this meant that the two turrets could be fired in any direction. And the breastwork monitors had a low freeboard. However, it has that breastwork and citadel and turrets mounted higher. So that meant that all the workings of the ship were above the water, protected from the ocean. And the funnel is protected by the superstructure. And so this meant that breastwork monitors were, with a higher armored deck, meant that this was a functional type of ships. So the citadel is great for turret bases, air shafts, and keep the hatchways clear of the sea. Now, monitors initially were a bad design. Why? Because of freeboard issues, because they weren't seaworthy. This ship goes from London all the way to Melbourne, Australia, right? Now, it hugs the coast, of course, but nevertheless, it is a safe ocean-going vessel. And so Cerberus is the first low freeboard battleship after the Captain. Designer Reed was not worried about the low freeboard because it was mastless and a coastal defense monitor intended to defend Melbourne. It weighed 3,444 tons. Its length was 225 feet by 45 feet beam. It had 4 10-inch muzzle-loading guns, and it was laid down in 1867 and was completed in 1870, the same month that the Captain was lost. So the Cerberus is the genesis of battleship design. That's what makes this ship so important. Now, the British didn't care so much about it. Why? They're sending it to Australia. Why do they have to send it to Australia? Melbourne was the largest and richest city in the southern hemisphere. And they had gold. They had gold strikes at Ballarat, not too far away. And so it's a very impactful vessel, although most of the British public don't really care about it. They're not realizing that we're creating a mastless ironclad capable of working at sea and steaming 11,000 miles. So, wow, no monitor could do that. And the British, see, they had created the first iron hull construction. And so this whole ship is a true ironclad, unlike the Virginia, which had a wooden hull. Now, so once the British build this ship, they say, oh my gosh, look at what we're going to come up with now. Now, this is the Devastation, and it really was devastating to its enemies. It is the real modern battleship design. And this was 9,387 tons. Work began on it in November of 1869 and completed in 1873. The Devastation incorporated a good balance of speed, protection, and armament. Because of the weight of the armor required and the fact that rigging would hinder the turreted guns from being able to fire in a wide arc, it was built to be powered by steam only. That mast is a lookout mast, and it has no other function. It looks like you could put a sail up, but they never did because it wasn't needed. because you have to realize simultaneously with all this, we're seeing changes in engine plants. So basically, this was the first ironclad not to have sails built in the Royal Navy. And as Reed himself said, my clear and strong conviction at this moment is that no satisfactory designed turreted ship with rigging has yet to be built. And he proved it with the Cerberus and once again with the Devastation. Oh, wow. Now, it was the first ocean-going massless man of war. And I say that because the Cerberus is meant to be a harbor defense vessel. This is meant to go all over the place. Now remember, there's a great race right now about building ships. Italy has just unified itself, so they're starting to build centerline turreted warships. The French are trying all sorts of crazy designs to try and outbuild Great Britain, but Britain keeps improving the mark that everyone else has to follow up with. Now, this is going to be powered by twin screw trunk engines. Its hull was iron and armored. It was 285 feet by 62 feet beam. Twin propellers allowed a speed of 12.5 knots. With the midship superstructure, there was an armament of 4 12-inch muzzle-loading rifles and 2 centerline turrets. The side armor was 12 inches, tapering as you went down below the waterline to 8 inches, all supported by 18 inches of teak, and then another 2 layers of 0.75 iron plate. Oh my gosh. 27% of the weight of this vessel is going to be basically in its armor. You know, so they recognize the improvements in artillery is going to have to make our ship design slightly different. Plus, we actually designed the hull to meet the need of a steamship, not a sailing ship. Just remember, if we have a sailing ship, we have to have more shear of a hull. So, oh my gosh, this is really pretty neat. It could carry 1,800 tons of coal, and it needed this coal capacity because it only operated under steam. And with this huge superstructure, the ship appeared to be top-heavy. However, when commissioned at Portsmouth, someone placed a note on the gangway, "Letters for the captain may be posted here," i.e. the sunken captain, you know, and that this ship was going to sink too because it was heavy. But actually, because of the design of the hull, it was not. And it was a well-beloved ship, and actually, it is going to serve for 25 years in the Royal Navy. Now, not to get confused with my real favorite ship, this is the Dreadnought #1. Well, actually, I think it's #5 or something like that. But the big thing is, the Dreadnought was also designed by Edward Reed, and it was laid down in 1870, but it was stopped building because of the captain. They had to investigate why that ship sank. So the Dreadnought is the last of British ironclads, and I say that because what are we going to go to? Steel construction, which gives superiority in a series of ways. However, it was 10,820 tons, 320 feet in length, and 64-foot beam. Main armament, once again, 4 12.5-inch guns and 2 turrets. Now, these guns and these turrets, right, they employed a hydraulic system for loading. And that's all because of the design of the Coles turret. That cylinder has been enlarged. And so the hydraulics means, you know, there was a guy on the monitor that had a hernia trying to lift 162-pound shells up into the turret. So least we're saving people from that. Now, it also had a non-compound trunk-type engines working with a maximum steam pressure of 30 pounds per square inch. The battleship had a three-cylinder vertical engines working with 600 pounds per square inch. The two engine rooms were divided by a watertight bulkhead, right, which is very, very important. And it also had a double hull. Okay, so in other words, those nasty little torpedo boats, which were becoming more and more effective, and that they needed to guard against it. Now, this had two turrets. They had very good field of fire, and so this is the last ironclad of the Royal Navy. But look how it is evolving into what? The modern look of a battleship. Oh my gosh. Then we go even farther with the Inflexible, because I want you to really look at this ship. It is probably the height. Now, the big thing is we're teaching ourselves about the modern battleship. The Dreadnought and the Inflexible are ships that set the pattern of ship design. Now, the Inflexible was laid down in 1874, and it was a heavier ship, 11,880 tons, 320 feet in length, 75-foot beam, check that out, 4 16-inch, 81-ton Armstrong muzzle-loading rifles. The rifles were 81 tons apiece, right? Now, the two 750-ton turrets off the center line to allow a head fire to limit the blast damage from firing to the rest of the ship. Now, they had a single breastwork, right, of armor surrounding the turrets and the superstructure. Now, remember, they're all iron, well protected. However, the guns, these new guns, were too long to be brought back into the turret for loading. So they had to build this breastwork or barbette so that they could reload the turret, which was done by depressing them into an armor glacis completely surrounding the turrets. And so you had to depress the guns, and then you had hydraulic reloading. Actually, this ship can fire a 1,700-pound shell every 2.5 minutes. So that's impressive. Especially when you think of. So this the armor. This is tremendous thickness of armor. 12-inch armor backed by 36-inch teak. The deck was 3-inch armor deck. It carried also 2 torpedo boats, right? So that if the torpedo guys are trying to get me, well, I'm going to put my torpedo boats in the water and go get you. And so, and it also had quick firing guns, which you can see. And so, what does this all mean? Well, the British in 20 years has taken the very concept of an iron-plated frigate and a monitor and a casemated ship that we see in the United States during the Civil War, and have gone completely beyond it. Now, the U.S. Navy, believe it or not, at this time says, well, we'll just watch what they're doing, and so actually when we have the 1873 Virginius affair, all we have available are monitors to send down and fight the Spanish fleet that had developed itself like the Royal Navy battleships. So we couldn't really make a reaction. We try to improve the monitors we have with the new Navy monitors. However, it's not until actually 1883 that we start building ships that appear like this. They were the ABCD series: Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, and Dolphin. Well, I got to tell you, remember the Dreadnought we already talked about? Right? One of my favorite ships. Oh, there it is. Well, we're going to put out, the Royal Navy is going to put out in 1905 the real battleship of the future, known as the Dreadnought, turbine powered, meaning oil. Oh my gosh, 10 12-inch guns, 27 12-pounder guns, 11-inch steel plate. It set the stage for the naval race that only will be slowed by the Washington Naval Treaty, but still, once the treaty expires, larger and more powerful battleships will be built. The sad thing is, one battleship needs just one bomb from an aircraft, which is, the cost ratio is a little different. But the Royal Navy led the world in taking the concepts of ironclads during war into step by step. They got rid of masts. They got rid of sails. They made their ships able to be ocean going, a gun platform that was stable and was able to protect British interests all over the world. France, Italy, Spain, even Germany all copied these changes that the British are making because they're always one step ahead. And so that is the evolution of Royal Navy ironclads in a 20-year period. Thank you.
John, did they call that a crow's nest up there?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
It was observation. So, basically, you did not have good optics then. You did not have, the wireless had not been perfected, so you needed to see where you were going and see where the enemy ships were. So that's even a better one. And of course, they put the spars on there just to look good, but they didn't use them.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, and that is, if you look at battleships, that's what you're going to see.
Well, it was a busy 20 years of changes, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. Well, going
Amazing.
from that
Yeah.
right? Notice the change, that's the Warrior. And within 10 years, the British had already figured out turrets are the way to go, not breastwork, not broadside. They also figured out that they had to rely not on sail. They didn't need sail because steam became the reliable source. And when they developed the turbine engines, that's when you can build the true modern battleship. But those battleships all became realistic based on, not that guy. See, this is bad, It was a totally bad design, and it should have never been approved. So the Cerberus, I think, is really the classic example of what the basis of future navies are going to look like. Okay, any questions?
Questions in the room? How about online, Olivia? I'll come back to you, Harry.
We do have a few questions online. The first one from Michael is, John, how would you compare the capabilities of La Gloire or Gloire?
La Gloire?
Yeah. Or HMS Warrior to USS New Ironsides, the U.S. ocean-going broadside ironclads built in the Civil War?
Okay, well, basically, the French ship was merely just plated with 4 inches of iron. It wasn't a big deal, but it was ironclad going at war. The New Ironsides could go to war, but remember, it had a limited battery, limited speed. So the Warrior combined powerful armament, which was better than the armament on the New Ironsides and La Gloire,
La Gloire.
Goa, okay, my French speaker here. But just think the Warrior has 40 guns, right? The Warrior, the big line of it, whatever ship it can't destroy, it can outrun because it goes 17.5 knots. None of those other ships could come close to that. And so if you had a tussle between the Warrior and the new Ironsides, the Warrior would win.
Harry.
All right, John, you're going to hate me for this.
I brought a gun. No, I'm kidding.
What would you consider a pre-dreadnought, and are these ships you're talking about pre-dreadnoughts?
Well,
or are
they
in a different category?
no, these are
He doesn't hate
these are ships that evolve into the protected cruisers and battleships that you see being made in the 1880s, 1890s. They're made of steel. They have more powerful guns. They have secondary armament. And so they were not as well protected as future ships will be. So it is Lord Jackie Fisher who comes up with the big gun ship concept. And so that means everything else before it was dead in the water. Just like the first dreadnought, or not the first, but the 19th century, 1870s dreadnought, let me get that straight, blew everything else out of the water, because of superiority of engines, superiority of ship design, superiority of the guns. And so that is a huge leap forward. And the British had to continue to make these leaps forward because they are protecting a world empire, and everybody wants to nip at their heels. Italy, France, Spain, Germany, and so they have to continue to experiment. Their experimentation, because they were such a wealthy nation, they could build a ship and a year later, well, that's not a good one. That wasn't a good design, especially the captain. There's no second captain, I'm going to tell you that. But the big thing is that it's how we finally come across the Inflexible and the Dreadnought and the Cerberus. Those are all ships that are going to be just like the future navies are going to be. It's just that no one understands steel construction yet. No one understands turbine power yet. No one understands the true power of heavier guns. When you think about 12-inch guns, those rams on some of those ships, well, too bad for you. You weren't needed anymore.
Olivia, you have a question? I'll come back to you, sir, next.
All right, our next question is from Don. Was there any interest by the British in the Dahlgren Ordnance?
No. I have to tell you, Dahlgren was a brilliant gun designer. However, his efforts to make the transition into rifled guns was not that successful, other than lower, like a 30-pounder. Armstrong followed the concepts, or Brooke followed the concepts of Armstrong. So it's banding your guns so that you could withstand the huge explosion within the barrel to send that shell out at a rapid pace at a long distance. So when you look at naval guns of the Civil War era, the ones with all the bands are the ones that are the safest to fire and usually the best going. Parrott rifles were bad. The English never even looked at them. They had one band and they were tending to burst. So ordnance, the British led the way in breech loading ordnance, rifled ordnance. In fact, they were leading the way in ship design, warship design, steel construction, engine construction, you name it, that 20-year period of experimentation. which cost millions upon millions of dollars, proved that the Royal Navy will always be the leading navy in the world until World War II.
Yes, sir.
John, I don't have a question, but I've got a point. The HMS Warrior is still in Portsmouth, England.
I've been on it.
Oh, we have. I'm surprised that you just didn't mention that it is still around.
Yeah,
And has been renovated.
Beautifully renovated, yes.
Yeah, it, but it's got plastic guns.
Oh,
That's
dear.
okay. You know. But it is pretty neat, and it was a coal barge. And so the ship as we see it today was totally rebuilt to the original specifications. And so, yes, it's a fabulous, well, every ironclad is fabulous, if you ask me. But yeah, so yes, I would have to say the Warrior was restored or rebuilt because it's a symbol of the industrial age, right? Great Britain is the beginning of the industrial age. By the last part of the 19th century, other nations are catching up. So the British have to continue to employ better designs and more powerful guns, but the other nations follow suit. So, and that's another story for another time.
For another day. Olivia, another question?
Yeah, our next question is from Tom. How does the CSS Stonewall Jackson fit into the class of armored warships that we're talking about today?
Well, the Warrior would have blown it out of the water because the Stonewall, number one, was built in France, and it was only so seaworthy. It had a monstrous ram that caused it to be a little unstable in heavy seas. It did not, its turrets were actually pivot-mounted guns, and so that we use different gun ports. Would it have blown out of the water every monitor? Yes. Would the Warrior have blown it out of the water? Yes. So, you know, for the Confederacy, that's what they needed. You know, they were trying to get ironclads built in England, and those are the Lard rams, which in essence, the Hotspur is a derivation of that.
And from the room, any question or comment?
Well, I guess I was thorough today.
Well, we've
wasn't
got
I?
some more online, but you know,
Okay,
if
go ahead.
we're
Well,
still going.
Go for it, go for it.
Okay, so Peter asked a question that's related to what we were just speaking about from the gentleman here. The Portsmouth Naval Museum in England has the HMS M33 Ship Museum. Could this be considered the final use of the modern monitor design for iron ships?
Yes, I mean, you have to realize Russia, Austro-Hungarian Empire were building monitors. The first shot of World War I was with a monitor against Belgrade. And so monitors had a good use on these interior waters, and when we try to build what we call the new Navy monitors, they are good design. However, they're outclassed because of their lack of speed, lack of armament, and so that's what brings us even greater changes. So once again, I would not go to sea in a monitor. I would not want to fight in a monitor, and I'd like to be in the Dreadnought, you know.
So another question related to that from Neil. Where in the world can we now find pre-Dreadnought battleships? Is it just the Japanese Mikasa?
No, the Olympia in Philadelphia is the greatest example. Dreadnought style ship in America, that's the Texas, that would be the North Carolina. And it's pretty neat to go on the Olympia. They actually bronzed where Admiral Dewey, right, said, you know, what did he say? Fire when ready, Gridley. Yes, thank you, Monty. I was trying to shift to another
You stood
war,
there.
you know. Sometimes I'm a little slow on that.
And finally, from Robert, did any other country have an innovation that was incorporated in the Royal Navy?
Well, Italy had a designer, Giulio, that actually started to design sleeker ships with turrets. And so the Royal Navy, of course, started to use those concepts. They were already doing it. It's just the Italians got a couple of ships in the water before the British. The British were building them already. So everyone, all these ship designers are recognizing, you know, how to make these changes. The French, believe it or not, you know, because it's all about the weight of your ship in the water, and you got these 81-ton turrets, you know, that's going to impact your displacement. So the French build barbette guns on a rotating platform. And you know what a barbette is. It's an iron shield and no top, no sides, no back. And I don't think that was a good idea. And so, but that was their trying to respond to all these changes that what Great Britain was doing. So, yeah.